The hum of the server bank was a lullaby to Emma, a comforting white noise that drowned out the disquiet in her own head. Rows of blinking lights cast an ethereal glow on her face, highlighting the dark circles that nights spent deciphering complex code had etched around her eyes. At 27, she was already a rising star in the world of cybersecurity, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with the practiced grace of a virtuoso pianist. Yet, the familiar pang of loneliness gnawed at her. Emma was the black sheep of the Verma family. While her brother, Rohan, excelled in academics and social graces, Emma preferred the company of algorithms over classmates. Her love for computers blossomed early, a fascination that morphed into an exceptional talent. However, her parents, staunch believers in traditional careers, saw her tech genius as a rebellion, a rejection of the respectable path they'd envisioned for their children. Coding, that's not a real job, Emma, her mother Nalini would say, her voice laced with disappointment. You're wasting your potential on these machines. Their disapproval was a constant undercurrent in their once vibrant home. Rohan, the golden child, thrived on this dynamic. He excelled in law school, landing a coveted position at a prestigious firm. His recent marriage to Sonia, a woman as ambitious as him, only amplified the pressure on Emma. Sonia, with her designer clothes and perfectly manicured nails, viewed Emma's unconventional ways with disdain. Family dinners became a minefield of snide remarks and thinly veiled jabs, leaving Emma feeling like a guest in her own home. One particularly tense evening, the simmering animosity boiled over. Rohan, emboldened by Sonia's presence, launched into a tirade about Emma's unacceptable lifestyle. Her parents, worn down by years of friction, remained silent, their silence a deafening betrayal. You're an embarrassment, Emma, Rohan spat, his voice dripping with venom. Get your act together or get out. The words hung heavy in the air, a punch to the gut. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, blurring the accusing faces around her. In that moment, a decision solidified within her. With trembling hands, she packed a single suitcase, the meager contents a stark contrast to the emotional weight it carried. As she walked out the door, the click of the lock echoed behind her, a final punctuation mark on a fractured relationship. The following years were a whirlwind of change. Emma's talent opened doors, landing her a dream job as a cybersecurity consultant for a global tech firm. The city lights became her new home, the constant hum of urban life, a comforting replacement for the stifling silence of her childhood home. She built a life for herself, a life where her unconventional ways were celebrated, not scorned. One quiet evening, amidst the comforting glow of her laptop screen, an email notification jolted her. It was from an unknown sender, the subject line screaming urgency, financial crisis, urgent help needed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clicked it open. The email, sent by a frantic Rohan, detailed the crippling financial strain his bitter divorce with Sonia had caused. It spoke of their parents, forced to sell their beloved home and move into a cramped apartment. Shame burned in her gut, a bitter cocktail of anger and concern. Emma stared at the screen, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressing down on her. Should she extend an olive branch, a chance at reconciliation after their brutal rejection? Or would reopening that wound only breed more pain? The decision, she knew, would challenge everything she thought she knew about the meaning of family and the price of forgiveness. The weight of Rohan's email hung heavy on Emma. Days bled into nights as she grappled with the conflicting emotions, a potent mix of anger, hurt, and a flicker of concern for her parents. The image of their once proud home being sold, a symbol of their shattered dreams, gnawed at her. They never apologized, a voice whispered in her head. the voice of the young girl who craved acceptance. Yet another voice, laced with a weary strength, countered, "They're your family, Em." The decision to reach out felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty. Finally, after days of deliberation, she typed a tentative email. It was a simple message, devoid of accusations, offering only financial assistance. The send button felt like a leap of faith, a fragile thread cast out in hopes of reconnecting with a past she'd tried so hard to outrun. Days turned into weeks, the silence from her family deafening. Doubt, a persistent weed, began to take root. Had she made a mistake? Was this just another rejection waiting to happen? Just as despair threatened to consume her, a reply arrived. It was from Nalini, her mother. The email was short, the words stilted, yet they held a tremor of vulnerability Emma hadn't expected. "We received your email, Emma," Nalini wrote. "Your offer, we appreciate it, we'll discuss it amongst ourselves and get back to you." The email wasn't an apology, not even a heartfelt expression of gratitude. But it was an acknowledgement, a hesitant step towards a bridge that had been burned years ago. A sliver of hope flickered within Emma. Meanwhile, life in the city continued at its frenetic pace. Work deadlines loomed, demanding her full attention. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to Bilaspur, the small town she'd left behind. Memories, both cherished and painful, flooded her mind. She remembered lazy summer afternoons spent tinkering with her first computer, a clunky machine her father had gifted her. The shared joy of a successfully written program, the look of pride in his eyes, a silent validation of her unconventional passion. A stark contrast to the disappointment that clouded his face whenever she brought home less than stellar grades. Another memory surfaced, more painful this time. A school play, her first and last. The stage lights had blinded her, the audience a faceless blur. Her voice had cracked mid-sentence, and she'd fled the stage in humiliation. Rohan, ever the star student, had delivered a flawless performance later that evening, basking in the applause. The memory left a bitter taste in her mouth, a reminder of the constant comparison, the feeling of never being good enough. With a sigh, Emma pushed the memories aside. Dwelling on the past wouldn't change anything. Yet, the email exchange had opened a Pandora's box of emotions, forcing her to confront the lingering wounds of her childhood. As she drifted off to sleep that night, a single question echoed in her mind: could forgiveness truly heal the fractured bond with her family? Weeks stretched into a month, and the silence from Bilaspur grew increasingly deafening. Hope, once a flickering ember, began to dwindle. Emma convinced herself that her attempt at reconciliation had been a fool's errand. Yet, a nagging worry gnawed at her. What if something was wrong? What if her parents, especially her father with his underlying health issues, were struggling more than they let on? Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, she made a decision. She booked a flight to Bilaspur, a one-way ticket a testament to her tentative commitment. The journey felt like a trip back in time. The familiar sights and sounds of the city, the bustling market, the honking rickshaws, it brought back a flood of childhood memories. Yet, a sense of apprehension clouded her excitement. Reaching their old neighborhood, she found a smaller, more modest apartment tucked away in a bylane. A wave of sadness washed over her as she gazed at the faded paint and chipped plaster. Taking a deep breath, she climbed the stairs, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Nalini opened the door, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond her years. The initial shock of seeing Emma gave way to a hesitant smile. "Emma," she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "Hi, Ma," Emma said, her voice cracking with unshed tears. I came to see you both." The reunion was awkward, filled with long pauses and unspoken apologies. Rohan was absent, a fact that hung heavy in the air. They spoke about trivial things, the weather, the changing face of the city, anything to avoid addressing the elephant in the room. Yet, amidst the awkwardness, a glimmer of warmth remained. During dinner, Nalini mentioned a recent health scare her father had endured. Shame washed over Emma as she realized the depth of their struggles. The email, she understood, wasn't just about financial hardship. It was a desperate cry for help, a bridge tentatively extended despite their past differences. Later that night, as she sat beside her sleeping father, she saw a vulnerability she hadn't noticed before. The lines on his face seemed deeper, his once strong hands weathered by time. A wave of tenderness washed over her, erasing years of resentment. In that moment, she saw him not just as a disapproving parent, but as a man facing his mortality, yearning for the connection they'd lost. The next few days were filled with a tentative reconnection. They helped her father around the house, shared stories from their respective lives, and laughed over old family memories. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. The years of hurt and resentment hadn't vanished, but a fragile seed of forgiveness had been sown. The day of her departure arrived too soon. As she hugged her parents goodbye, a sense of closure settled over her. "I'll call you," she promised, the words carrying a weight of unspoken promises. Boarding the plane, she looked back at the receding city skyline. The journey back to her life in the city was different this time. It wasn't just a return to familiar routines, but a newfound connection with her past. The question of forgiveness remained, a challenge she was yet to fully confront. But, as the plane soared through the clouds, a flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps, with time and a genuine effort from both sides, they could rebuild the bridge that had been broken for so long. Back in the city, life resumed its frenetic pace. Work deadlines loomed, demanding Emma's full attention. Yet, the tentative reconciliation with her parents remained a constant undercurrent in her thoughts. The awkward silences, the unspoken apologies, and a glimmer of hope for a renewed relationship all swirled within her. One evening, as she finished a particularly challenging project, a video call notification from Rohan popped up on her screen. Hesitantly, she clicked accept. Rohan's face appeared on the screen, a strained smile plastered on it. "I am," he said, his voice laced with a hint of nervousness. "Hi, Rohan," she replied, unsure of where the conversation would lead. Small talk followed, a dance around the real issue. Finally, Rohan broached the subject of their parents. He admitted they were hesitant to accept her financial help, their pride a stubborn barrier. But he also acknowledged their growing dependence on it, especially after a recent medical setback their father had faced. "They miss you, Em," Rohan confessed, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "We all do." Emma was taken aback by his admission. Years of competition, the snide remarks, all seemed to fade away in the face of his genuine remorse. "I miss you too, Rohan," she said softly, surprised by the truth of her words. The conversation wasn't a complete resolution, but it marked a shift. Over the next few weeks, calls and video chats with her parents and Rohan became a regular occurrence. They weren't sugar-coated conversations. There were moments of tension, old wounds reopening. But through it all, there was a newfound effort on everyone's part to understand each other's perspectives. Then came the bombshell. Rohan called, his voice choked with emotion. Sonia had filed for full custody of their daughter, Dia, using Emma's financial assistance as leverage to paint her as an irresponsible influence. The news hit Emma like a punch to the gut. The anger she'd buried deep within her resurfaced, a boiling pot threatening to spill over. But as she looked at her parents' worried faces during a video call that evening, she knew anger wouldn't solve anything. "I'll come home," she declared, her voice firm. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Legal consultations, gathering evidence, and most importantly, spending time with Dia, a bright and curious little girl who reminded Emma of herself at that age. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing were tense. Emma faced Sonia's vitriol in court, her past used as a weapon. Yet, her parents' unwavering support and Dia's innocent affection fueled her strength. The judge's decision was a victory. Dia would spend alternate weekends and half of every summer with Emma. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start, a chance for Emma to build a bond with her niece. As life settled into a new rhythm, Emma realized that forgiveness wasn't a light switch, a simple flick from on to off. It was a journey, a long and arduous one at times. She had forgiven her parents not for their past actions, but for the effort they were putting into rebuilding their relationship. Rohan remained an enigma. They'd acknowledged their past mistakes and worked towards a civil coexistence, but true forgiveness felt like a distant bridge to cross. Yet, seeing him play with Dia, a genuine smile on his face, ignited a flicker of hope. Perhaps with time forgiveness would blossom there too. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights twinkle, a call came in. It was her father. His voice, usually laced with stoicism, held a tremor of emotion. "We're proud of you, Emma," he said. "Always have been." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. The simple words, a long-awaited apology, felt like a balm on her wounded heart. In that moment, she knew the price of forgiveness was high, but the reward, a rekindled connection with her family, was priceless.